From thirsty frogs to macho cowboys, from household names to less than memorable monikers. For almost 400 years, when America had the time,
You got the time.
they drank the beer.
We got the beer.
America's love affair with beer has been a long one, but it's also been a rocky road. From the Mayflower to Milwaukee, we'll uncover the behind-the-scenes stories of how beer became big in America. Plus, go inside the country's most celebrated breweries to learn the science of beer making.
One operator runs this whole brew house.
An American eats beer. Whether it's light, dark, bottled, tapped, great tasting, or less filling, there's no doubt about it. America loves beer.
Asking me what my favorite type of beer is like asking me which of my children I love the most.
Beer is the #1 selling beverage in the world, and in America, it outsells wine and liquor 2.5 to 1. From ale to stout, light beer to microbrews, our nation's breweries make more than 100 different styles of beer. Today, they brew it in state-of-the-art facilities, boasting everything from mills that hold more than 250,000 pounds of malt to 36,000-gallon temperature-controlled fermenting tanks. But these high-tech breweries are just the latest incarnation of an age-old practice.
The history of beer goes back at least 10,000 years. Most anthropologists now believe that people went from a hunter-gatherer existence to a settled agricultural existence in order to have enough grain to make beer.
We're not really sure where it started, but it was somewhere in Mesopotamia.
Historically, what we call beer is an alcoholic beverage produced when sugars and malted grains are fermented by naturally occurring yeast.
Because it was an additional nutrient source. It's really cereal grain that's been fermented, so it's additional carbohydrates, energy. It's unlikely that beer was a deliberate invention. It was probably discovered by accident when some yeast contaminated some cereal grain that had been spoiled by water. Maybe it was being used or prepared to make bread. Whatever happened, they liked the taste of it.
Taste wasn't beer's only appeal in the ancient world. The Bavarians added an essential ingredient to the modern beer recipe. Wow. Hops.
Hops are a small, fluffy, papery green cone that contain aromatic substances
Very fresh.
and bitterness, which balances out the sweet maltiness of beer.
Hops became a standard ingredient as beer spread throughout Europe, as much a part of everyday life as bread, and for good reason. Boiling beer during brewing kills off deadly microbes, but no one at the time knew it was the process of boiling that made beer safe. They didn't think to apply this principle to water.
They attributed good health to drinking beer. Well water in many parts of Europe was contaminated. And beer, because the water is boiled along with the barley and hops before yeast is added, is sterilized. So it was a safe product.
So it shouldn't be surprising that when the Pilgrims boarded a ship in England in 1620 and headed for the New World, the hull was full of brew.
It's axiomatic that we talk about things that are very old in American culture as coming over on the Mayflower, and beer came over on the Mayflower.
But it did more than just come over. Beer played a role in changing the course of American history.
It's amazing how much brewing has had to do with our history, right from the get-go.
The Mayflower's destination was Virginia, but bad weather conditions delayed their landfall. With food and beer reserves getting scarce, they were forced to settle elsewhere.
So the crew decided that they had to drop the Pilgrims pretty soon because they feared that they would not have provisions, including beer, for the long trip home. So Plymouth was it.
From day one, beer was vital in colonial America. Even though the water in America was pristine, old prejudices from Europe remained.
They didn't trust water, but beer they could rely on. They knew that it was nourishing, they knew it was safe to drink, and it was an important part of their life.
You drank beer from the time you got up in the morning until you went to bed, and that's men, women, and children.
Most early colonial households brewed their own beer, a hearty brew for the adults and something called small beer for the children.
Small beer was a style of beer which was made from a second rinsing of the same grain you had made some other beer with. So you can almost think of it as like reusing the tea bag to make weaker tea.
Beers were taken for granted as a normal part of life, the way we think of bread or butter.
With beer in such high demand, Quaker William Penn opened Pennsylvania's first commercial brewery in 1683 at his home 20 miles north of Philadelphia.
Typical colonial brewery would be a small brick building. Inside it, the primary piece of equipment would be a furnace with a copper kettle on top of it. There would be a vessel for holding the mash, which would just essentially look like a giant wooden laundry tub. In another part of the brewery, a room filled with wooden tanks that would be used to ferment the beer. And then in the coolest, darkest, dankest part of the brewery would be a series of barrels where the beer would be allowed to finish fermentation before it was shipped out to the taverns.
By the late 1600s, breweries were popping up all over the country, from Rhode Island to Georgia, and so were the taverns that served their product.
The tavern in colonial times was kind of all important. I mean, everything happened there. Usually when it got dark, people went to bed or they went to the tavern, where it was warm. All your friends were there anyway. They were burning their own coal in the wintertime, which meant that you didn't really have to heat your house. It was the center of the community.
And ale, a type of beer where the yeast ferments on top, was the staple of colonial taverns, but in a variety of styles.
Well, during colonial times, actually, you had a lot of different types of beer. The most popular type of beer was called porter, which was a precursor to stout. You also had all kinds of wild stuff made from whatever was available. Pumpkin ale, for example, was really popular.
George Washington was partial to molasses, brewing his own beer with the ingredient. During the Revolutionary War, General Washington took his dedication to beer one step further, ordering daily rations for soldiers to include 1 quart of beer per man. In the decades following independence, ale was on the decline. Patriotic Americans viewed the brew as something from their British past and drank whiskey instead.
Never did have any use for the English.
Beer in America looked like it might be on its way out. All that would change when a new wave of European immigrants hit the American shores. During the first half of the 19th century, some 500,000 Germans immigrated to the United States, and along with their favorite schnitzels, spätzles, and sausages, they brought their favorite style of beer, lager.
The big difference between lager and ale is that the lager is fermented at cold temperatures. It's a longer, colder fermentation done by a different species of yeast than ferments ales.
Lager beer uses a yeast that tolerates cold temperature very well. It does that at the bottom of the tank rather than at the top of the tank, which is why you see lager referred to as bottom fermenting and ale referred to as top fermenting.
The result of the cold bottom fermentation was a lighter, crisper beer.
It was light and clear and smooth and easy drinking, and really quenched your thirst on a hot summer day like we have in North America. So lager beer was immediately adopted by Americans, and almost overnight we switched from being ale drinkers to being lager drinkers.
By the mid-1850s, lager had become popular with the German and British population, but lager was one high-maintenance beverage. It needed colder climates to be brewed at lower temperatures and kept on ice.
Lager beer requires fermentation at much cooler temperatures than ale, down in the 30 and 40 degree Fahrenheit range. So brewers needed a way to keep the fermentation vessels cool. Where they could, they would burrow into the side of a mountain or find a cave. But until the advent of refrigeration, it was really difficult to make lager beer.
The German lager makers set up shop up and down the Northeast, where the cold temperatures were most advantageous to brewing. This set the stage for a lager revolution that would storm the country. In 1990, a recipe for beer gleaned from the walls of King Tut's tomb was auctioned for $7,200. Welcome to D.G. Yingling & Son, America's oldest brewery.
Well, our company got started in 1829 by my great-great-grandfather who immigrated here from Württemberg, Germany. So we have quite a history of brewing in our family. Every member of the family, as time went on, every generation, someone stepped forward and was always interested in running the plant.
When David G. Yingling founded what was first called the Eagle Brewery, he chose Pottsville, Pennsylvania for its varied natural resources, like the springs that bubbled with pure mineral water, and the caves that in the age before refrigeration would keep the fermenting beer cool. Today, the company's run by the 5th and 6th generation of Yinglings. The original brewery is on the Registry of National Historic Places, but the company's main production operates in a state-of-the-art facility built in 2001. The entire operation is monitored through the computerized command unit.
This is the control room for the brew house. Every vessel, every valve in the brew house can be seen on this computer screen. The one operator runs this whole brew house.
Yingling makes 7 different types of beer, including their top seller, lager. The process for making lager begins with dried, germinated grains called malt.
Right now we're transferring malt up this line, and it's coming through this pipe right here, and it's going up to this receiver.
The malt ends up in a mill, which can grind 250,000 pounds at a time. The malt is transferred to a mash tun, where it's mixed with boiled, pulverized corn known as grits.
In this vessel, we have about 13,000 pounds of grits and about 1,000 pounds of malt.
The hot grits raise the temperature of the mash, releasing enzymes that break down the starches into fermentable sugars.
1 degree of difference in the mash vessel will actually give you quite a bit of difference in alcohol content or non-fermentable sugar content in the finished product.
From there, it's transferred to a lauter tun, a filtering device that separates the mash from the liquid formed by the fermentable sugars called the wort. The wort is boiled for 90 minutes before a key ingredient is added: hops.
Right now, Kevin's adding the hopping.
Once the wort is injected with yeast, it's transferred to the 36,000-gallon fermentation tank.
What that is CO2 being produced from the fermentation. This fermentation was started about 30 hours ago, so right now it is in just about its most active state.
The beer is cooled, carbonated, aged for 2 weeks, then quality tested. Now it's ready to be bottled.
Here the bottles are being released from the filler, having already been filled. They're being transferred to the crowner, where the crown is applied and they are conveyed down the conveyor. Filler runs approximately 900 bottles per minute. In an 8-hour period, that's about 18,000 cases of beer.
The bottled beer is then loaded for shipping.
This fella here, the unloader, is called Hans. This fellow, the loader here, is called Franz. These are automatic robots that will unload the kegs from the incoming pallets and also reload the finished product onto pallets for loading into the truck or into the cold room.
With the beer brewed, bottled, capped, loaded, and shipped, there is one final step for the brewmaster.
And at the end of the day, it's time for a fine lager.
Yingling's longevity is certainly unique among American breweries. But the story of its founder, young German immigrant strikes it rich brewing beer, is anything but rare. When Yingling was founded in 1829, the explosion of German brewers was just getting started. By 1868, there were more than 1,300 local brewers operating in the U.S., up more than 50% from 10 years earlier. And one place in particular became the center of it all, a little town on the western shore of Lake Michigan named for an Indian word meaning the good land, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In a rapidly expanding nation, Milwaukee was also closer to the west, near transportation lines and surrounded by fresh water and farmland for grain. It was a perfect location for brewing.
Out of Milwaukee came really larger breweries that have lasted up into the present.
Breweries were being led by tough-minded, forward-thinking German immigrants like Frederick Pabst, Frederick Miller, and Joseph Schlitz.
They're huge now, but they started small. And what really led these breweries forward into the future was really drive. I mean, these guys wanted to build empires for themselves and for their families. These guys had the classic American mindset, go big.
Joseph Schlitz got his start in 1856 when he married the widow of a brewery owner where he worked as a bookkeeper. Steamship Captain Frederick Pabst also married into the business, wedding the daughter of Jacob Best, a local brewer, in 1862. And then there was Frederick Miller, far from your typical greenhorn.
Frederick Miller came from Germany. He was educated in France. He came from a very well-to-do family.
Miller arrived in New York with $9,000 in gold. That's almost $200,000 today. Miller had been a successful brewer in Germany, at one point brewing under the royal seal. According to legend, he hand-carried his special brewing yeast with him all the way from Germany, and then spent a year searching for the right place to start his American brewing business. In 1855, he brewed his first barrel of lager in Milwaukee. By the 1860s, Miller, Pabst, and Schlitz were all in a spirited struggle for Milwaukee's thirsty patrons.
In the mid-19th century, there's this joke that used to be told about Milwaukee that every sink in every household had 3 faucets, one for hot water, one for cold, and one for beer.
There's been competition from day one. These guys were looking to beat each other on their home turf. They'd be happy if they had a tavern 2 or 3 blocks from the other guy's brewery that carried their beer. It was sort of like a little, to the other brewer. And these guys were like the steel barons and railroad barons. It was the same sort of mindset. I want it all. And each of them did.
When Schlitz began using the slogan, "The beer that made Milwaukee famous," Pabst came up with a proudly contrary slogan of its own. Milwaukee beer is famous. Pabst has made it so. Pabst may have been right. In 1893, it became the first brewery in the nation to sell 1 million barrels of beer in a single year. But while Schlitz, Miller, and Pabst were fighting it out in Milwaukee, another brewing baron was rising up in St. Louis, who would change the history of American beer forever. Beginning in the mid-1600s, Harvard had an on-campus brewery that supplied beer to students. The practice continued for more than a century. Ever since guys like Miller, Schlitz, and Pabst set up breweries in the mid-19th century, Milwaukee has been regarded as America's best-known beer town. But 400 miles away, the city of St. Louis, Missouri is home to the largest brewery in America, Anheuser-Busch.
Adolphus Busch was one of the original idea men in beer marketing.
Adolphus Busch really reminds me of Donald Trump of today.
Inside the Anheuser-Busch brewery, they crank out more than 1,300 bottles per minute, 1,000 kegs per hour. More than 12% of all the beer in the world emanates from this 1.6 million square foot campus, including its flagship beer, Budweiser. Here, the recipe for Budweiser is carefully mixed, boiled, and fermented in a state-of-the-art environment that monitors temperatures and yeast growth. Anheuser-Busch produces the #1 selling beer in America. The incredible success of Anheuser-Busch wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the ambitions of one man. On March 7, 1861, in the bustling frontier town of St. Louis, Missouri, a 21-year-old brewery supply salesman, originally from Mainz, Germany, married the 16-year-old daughter of a brewery owner named Eberhard Anheuser.
Eberhard Anheuser had gotten hold of a brewery through a Dutch collection, didn't really know what to do with it.
But his new son-in-law, Adolphus Busch, had a few ideas.
He was clearly a visionary, a lot of ambition, and a lot of drive. So I would imagine he was quite a dynamic person.
By the 1870s, Busch was in control of the newly christened Anheuser-Busch Brewery. He wrote, "It is my aim to win the American people over to our side, to make them all lovers of beer." Not as easy as it might sound. In those days, the only beer people drank at home was the stuff they made themselves or bought locally.
Back in the 1800s, beer was a very local beverage. If you wanted to take beer home, you went to the local tavern with a bucket, or what we called a growler, and had the tavern owner fill it up for you.
There was only one problem.
The shelf life of the beer was very short. It did spoil. Beer was brewed for almost immediate consumption in those days. So you didn't have big distribution networks.
If Busch was going to get his beer to the people, he'd have to make it last longer. Bottles offered a great solution, since the beer inside could be pasteurized to prevent spoiling. But at the time, they were still made by hand and very expensive. But Busch was a visionary. In 1873, ignoring the costs and concentrating on the eventual benefits, he became the first brewer to bottle beer for shipping. When the automatic glass-blowing machine was invented in 1895, other brewers began bottling. But Anheuser-Busch was already out in front and ahead of the industry-changing trend.
Bottling changed the way America drinks.
For the first time, a person could actually buy beer in a bottle, take it home, take it on a picnic, enjoy it at a family celebration without having to be at the tavern.
With beer liberated from the tavern, Busch saw no reason to keep it local. And with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, he saw a new, fast way to get it to the rest of the country.
And the iron horse roared across the plain, and towns grew beside its rails.
In 1887, Anheuser-Busch formed a subsidiary company, the Manufacturers Railway Company. Its purpose, to produce railway cars to ship beer cold across the United States.
The refrigerated rail cars were refrigerated by ice, and it would keep the beer cold. Now, obviously that ice would melt, so we had to construct a distribution system where we had ice houses along the railroad routes where the cars could be replenished and fresh ice could be put into the rail cars to keep the beer cold.
Now that his lager could travel nationwide, he wanted to create a signature beer with one taste that everyone in the nation could enjoy.
The idea was to create a light lager, very crisp and drinkable, that had really mass appeal to all kinds of different tastes.
Busch had just the beer. It was a pale, light lager called Pilsner. His business partner, Karl Conrad, had sampled it while traveling through the Austro-Hungarian Empire in a city called Budweis. In 1876, Busch introduced his own version of the Pilsner in the United States. He called it Budweiser.
Here we go.
Here comes the king. Here comes the king. Here comes the big number one.
Here comes the king.
Budweiser beer, the king is second to none.
Budweiser beer.
To promote the new national beer, Busch, ever the showman, traveled all over the country in a luxurious railroad car named the Adolphus, passing out premiums like a pocket knife corkscrew emblazoned with the company's name. The campaign was a success.
People saw the beer sparkling in the sunlight, and they just went nuts. The beer they had drunk their entire lives, they now wanted nothing to do with. All they wanted was the new golden beer.
By the early 1900s, Budweiser was selling at a rate of 1 million barrels annually, one for every 75 Americans. Busch's dream of turning Americans into beer lovers was coming true, and brewers everywhere were reaping the rewards.
Instead of being a small business, these were really industries now. They were making a lot of money, and they had a reach that encompassed the entire continent.
The brewing industry in 1900 was about 39 million barrels. breweries at the turn of the century were operating at a pretty much unprecedented scale in terms of the size of their operations, and allowed them to produce very large amounts of beer very economically and efficiently.
By the beginning of the 20th century, the most profitable breweries in the United States were Schlitz, Pabst, Anheuser-Busch, and Miller. And they were all competing with each other to get bigger. But the brewing industry was about to be faced with problems a lot tougher than friendly competition. On May 7, 1915, the British ocean liner Lusitania was struck by a German torpedo, killing 1,195 passengers, including 128 Americans. This disaster would have huge ramifications for the beer industry.
When the Lusitania was sunk by a German torpedo, what happened was German-American brewers were suddenly looked at incredibly disfavorably by this country.
People looked at who was selling the beer and who was making the beer, and all the names, Anheuser, Busch, Coors, Schlitz, Peels, Tromers, Schaefer, they were all German names.
Americans boycotted everything German, including beer, which was branded Kaiser Brew after Germany's leader. Then, on January 16, 1920, Prohibition went into effect, hitting brewers even harder.
Prohibition actually kind of took the major brewers by surprise. They weren't prepared for it. Beer was such an important part of life that they never imagined that it would actually be outlawed.
August Busch outlined the grim prospect with blunt realism.
Gentlemen, our business as we have known it is ended.
A lot of them immediately panicked and sought other means to try to stay viable during this period. They knew it would be repealed. They had no idea when.
So in the meantime, the big breweries turned their attention to making other products to stay afloat.
We went into about 26 different businesses. We made refrigerated cabinets. We made baker's yeast. We made malt syrup. We made ice cream.
Anheuser-Busch entered the corn products field, and soon its syrups, starches, and dextrins appeared on the market.
And then there were the do-it-yourself Prohibition products.
Some of them started making malt extract. So here they were in the brewery, they're making malt extract, putting it in cans and jars. It's then going home and people are making beer out of it.
You would get a brick of malt sugar, and basically it came with instructions. Whatever you do, don't take this brick and melt it in water and boil it for an hour with these hops, and certainly don't put this yeast into it, or an intoxicating illegal beverage may result. So beer making didn't go away.
Not quite, anyway. Prohibition did allow for at least some alcoholic content in beverages. It set the alcohol limit at 1/2 of 1%. With those limitations in place, many brewers began making a product called near beer.
Near beer is a wretched concoction produced by going through the first part of the brewing process and then stops that fermentation through various means. You end up with a fairly insipid, of course weak in alcohol, not all that pleasant beverage.
Anheuser-Busch had Bevo.
A new non-alcoholic beverage was introduced and instantly became a popular favorite, Bevo.
Miller marketed Vivo, and Pabst promoted Pablo, which is short for Pabst Low. In 1921, a mere 300 gallons of near beer were produced, and the results were anything but appetizing.
The taste for beverages such as Bevo dwindled and died.
Whoever called it near beer was a poor judge of distance.
Finally, on April 7th, 1933, Prohibition was repealed.
President Roosevelt signed the 21st Amendment. So ended a 13-year alcohol drought.
But it had taken its toll on the beer industry. About half of the nation's 1,500 small-town breweries had gone under.
The ones that had been running on a shoestring and had many repairs, they simply closed their doors and they never reopened.
Small town breweries simply couldn't afford to reopen. They had gone broke in the decade of the 20s and simply didn't restart.
Those that remained turned their sights to a new technology, the can. Actually, the technology for canning food had been around since the beginning of the 19th century, but the beer industry had a tough time adapting it to their product.
They couldn't use the old-fashioned can that you might use for peas for beer. It was much more difficult because you would have to worry about the pressure being built up with the carbonation and whether it would explode the seams or not.
And the taste was an even bigger bomb.
If you tried to put beer into a can without lining it with some sort of a lacquer, you would have a can of beer that tasted like steel.
Then in the 1930s, the canning industry came up with a solution.
They used a heavier gauge of steel to make the cans and to counter the pressure.
They also developed a wax coating which preserved the beer's taste. In 1935, the Kruger Brewing Company was the first to successfully put beer in a can. But it was World War II that made the beer can man's best friend.
Most drinkers' introductions to cans came during World War II when the efficiencies of packing and shipping beer in can was obvious to the U.S. Army. So a lot of GIs returning home had a fondness for cans, and cans really didn't start to take off until that time.
And in 1962, the Pittsburgh Brewing Company's Iron City brand rolled out beer cans with a snap top, also known as the ring pull top.
No opener needed. Lift the tab, pull back, and it's open.
By the 1960s, the beer industry was clearly back on its feet, but it was about to get bigger than ever with the explosion of beer advertising. Anheuser-Busch, which uses rice in its Budweiser formula, buys about 15% of the total U.S. rice crop. From beautiful, beautiful beers.
Beautiful.
To sexy beer babes.
Pardon me, baby, but what's a nice beer like you doing in a can like this?
Every good brewer knows that to drive sales, you have to market the ever-loving Schlitz out of it.
With just the kiss of the hops.
While beer advertising had long been a part of American culture, remember the Anheuser-Busch combination pocket knife corkscrew? The post-World War II era would see beer advertising reach for new levels of exposure.
The golden age of brewery advertising really came in the years after World War II, when certain larger breweries like Anheuser-Busch and Schlitz were trying to develop national brands. And in order to support that, they started doing national and regional advertising on a scale that had not existed. Lots of full-page ads and television advertising.
Sports broadcasts became the perfect forum for the beer business to peddle their brew.
It was very simple at first. It was a matter of a bar owner putting up a television in the bar.
See me there while you're watching the CBS Game of the Week.
And it was a way to actually keep people sitting there in the bar and having a beer and watching the game at the same time. And then later, of course, you could broadcast right into their home.
Beer companies began to seek out identifiable characters, like a Jolly Green Giant, for the beer industry to broadcast across the country.
And they used characters that they repeated throughout their commercials over and over again.
In 1953, the Ham's Bear of St. Paul's Theodore Ham Brewery became one of history's most recognized advertising figures.
Now, the Ham's Bear was a jolly fellow who inhabited an imaginary world of little woodland creatures, and a memorable jingle that spoke about hams being the beer from the land of sky blue waters. It emerged in the 60s, lasted through the 70s, a time of more innocence than we're in today, in a time when the use of cartoon characters to market alcoholic beverages was a lot more acceptable than it is today, and sadly that led to the demise of the Ham's Bear.
Whether the advertising featured bears or barmaids, up until the 1960s, beer advertising operated on the same premise: selling the taste of beer.
Big, big taste.
Miller Brewing Company was about to change that.
It is the champagne of bottled beer.
In the late 1960s, Miller looked for a new image and a way to knock Anheuser-Busch, who claimed about a quarter of the market, off their perch.
They took their Miller High Life, which had been called the champagne of beers, which is maybe the most effete way to sell a beer possible, and suddenly they made that macho too.
You always thought you had the fastest quarter horse in 3 states, and he just proved it. Now's the time to head for the best tasting beer you can find.
In 1971, they launched a new slogan.
You've got the time, you've got the time, we've got the beer.
They turned it around. They gave us Miller time. Suddenly, because you're a working guy, you deserve a Miller. And the Miller brand just took off.
Sales of Miller High Life shot up 29% over the next 2 years. It was the first beer lifestyle campaign, but it was far from the last. But the battleground had shifted thanks to Rheingold's newest invention, light beer.
Real gusto in a great light beer.
It bombed.
People wanted to bring out a lower calorie beer. They also thought that women would be more likely to drink some of this beer so they could reach new markets. Well, no guy wanted to be sitting there at the time drinking something that said diet. So that's probably one reason why it failed.
That's not to say it couldn't be tweaked.
A couple of breweries later, the Miller Company bought it. And one of the great marketing creations of the 20th century was the turning of this women's diet beer into a macho, sports-based men's product.
Pleasure. Man-sized pleasure.
Miller had the perfect ad campaign to get men to change their mindset.
Their tagline became, to me, maybe the most brilliant tagline ever in advertising. It was, tastes great, less filling.
Between 1973 and 1978, Miller's sales exploded from 7 million to over 31 million barrels. In 1982, Anheuser-Busch got ready to introduce their light beer by taking advantage of one flaw in Miller's marketing. They noticed that in the name light beer from Miller, the brewery Miller didn't appear until the end, and they were ready to exploit that.
Miller calls their brand light beer from Miller. So you walk into a store and you say generically, give me a light. Budweiser, and they said, let's put our name right in the name. Let's really make it Bud Light. So you walk into a bar and you're asking for a name brand as opposed to some kind of generic.
Today, Bud Light is the #1 selling beer in the world.
Are you ready? I can't do this. No! No way! Not even for some Bud Light?
Throughout the 1980s and 90s, beer advertising got better and better at targeting their male audience.
Bud Light, great taste for your great times.
See you, dude!
Thanks to television, beer was all around us. But the phenomenal growth of Miller, Anheuser-Busch, and the other national brands during this golden age wasn't good for everyone.
Regional breweries started to die out because it was only for a while that they had enough money to keep up with the national advertising. And the national television advertising turned into the thing that drove sales.
It seemed that eventually there would be 3 or maybe even as few as 2 brewing companies left in the United States.
Luckily, the smaller breweries would soon create a whole new buzz of their own with a small idea that proved to be big business.
People in America embrace craft beer, microbrewed beer, because they're looking for products that have a little bit of character, or a lot of character.
Teddy Roosevelt once took over 500 gallons of beer with him on an African safari. Today, beer making is a modern, high-tech wonder for the top-selling brands. The American beer market alone accounts for nearly 20% of the worldwide beer market, with nearly 180 million barrels of beer sold annually.
A lot of the breweries look as much like nuclear power plants as anything else. You'll have a large, empty facility and a brightly lit control room with a lot of television monitors and a few people in there punching buttons and routing things around. They essentially can control all the functions of the brewery from a central control room. So we're talking very high-tech indeed.
With all their technology, national brands had virtually dominated the beer industry for over 50 years, at the expense of the smaller breweries. By the 1970s, there were barely any craft breweries around, thanks to corporate consolidation. Beginning in 1965, a graduate school student named Fritz Maytag made a big step for the little guy when he heard that a beloved local San Francisco brewery, the Anchor Brewing Company, was about to go out of business. He took it upon himself to save the company.
Well, when I bought the Anchor Brewing Company, I don't suppose anyone in the brewing industry even heard about it for years afterwards because it was so small. It was so unimportant. and so much ignored by the industry.
But not for long. Fritz was going to get noticed because he was about to launch a whole new brand of beer, including an ale, a porter, a small beer, and even a Christmas beer.
One of the things that microbreweries brought to the brewing industry was not just tradition and integrity in terms of raw materials and brewing history and brewing methods, but a focus on modern food science technology.
He started manufacturing quality beer and a lot of different varieties that the world had never seen before. He insisted upon using 2-row barley, which was very expensive, instead of 6-row barley, which was traditional in the brewing industry. It cost more, but it made a more tasty beer.
He created a little niche for not only for his own Anchor Brewing Company, but for a whole new generation of brewers who came online in the early 80s.
And thus the age of the microbrewery was on.
Who could imagine that some little guy could actually make beer and sell it commercially and have it be good? And so we were sort of to Budweiser and Miller's what Apple was to IBM.
Unlike the major brands that cater to a national audience, these small breweries can create unusual varieties and flavors, like Purple Haze and Black Chocolate Stout, allowing them to direct their product at the regional, neighborhood, and specialty markets. And do it all while only producing fewer than 30,000 barrels a year.
You don't have marketing committees determining exactly which beer you're going to make. It's really up to the whims of the brewmaster to decide what beers they want to make, offer it to customers that they may know personally. It's a very much of a hands-on type of thing.
We've made all kinds of things for fun, just once or twice. We enjoy doing that, like a chef in a restaurant who cooks up a new dish and just maybe does it once or does it for a week and then doesn't continue it on the menu. We do that too.
Doing specialized beers, they're reviving styles that we haven't seen in this country in a long time. Between them and imports, it's nearing 20% of the beer sales in this country, so they've been very successful at it.
It's weird for there only to be one kind of beer and one kind of bread and 3 kinds of cheese. And that's what we had for a long time in this country, was everybody ate the same thing, we drank the same thing, and we didn't have much of an opinion about it.
Now there are thousands of microbrews on tap, and although they don't outsell the big mansions of Miller, Bud, and Coors, who today dominate 80% of the country's beer sales, they have become an important cottage industry. The rise of microbreweries has given the American beer lover more choices, over 1,000 different beer choices in fact.
Brewers went out of their way to create something that was their own, something that was distinct to their own vision of what beer would be like. And this really affected people's perception of beer, and there was a ready market for it.
But regardless of which beer you choose for yourself, one thing is clear. Beer will forever be an essential part of the American persona.
America and beer grew up together.
I mean, you don't go to Fenway Park to have a glass of wine.
Wherever you go, beer is always a big part of any history, from the ancient Egyptians right up into the present. So it's a lot of fun to be part of it.
It started out as a way to avoid illness spread by water, and eventually was transformed into a recreational beverage enjoyed by casual drinkers and beer connoisseurs.
There's really a sense that beer, of all foods and beverages, that beer is really something special. And you see this, of course, in people who drink beer and get together and enjoy beer. There's always just a beautiful vibe.
Beer is very moderately alcoholic. Therefore, it tends to create some cheerfulness or some relaxation without any real serious detriment.
Beer has been around for, we believe, at least 5,000 years in some form or another.
It always comes back. It's good stuff. Beer is good stuff.
It is clearly, I think, one of the most incredible beverages of humankind.